All right, so today marks the official one-year anniversary of the January 6th attack on the Capitol building, where a bunch of rabid hog Trump supporters were mad that Donnie didn't win the election for them, so they decided to try to siege the Capitol building to stop the counting of the electoral votes that certified that Joe Biden did in fact win the election. Now, when it comes to talking about January 6th, I found that there's basically no way that you can go about this without having angry people on either side, right? On the one hand, I don't want to downplay what happened, and I don't want to pretend as if there was no threat and as if politicians weren't somewhat borderline on the verge of having some violence inflicted towards them. But on the other hand, I also don't want to overhype it for you guys to try to justify some sort of a Patriot Act 2.0 style response to this, because I think that's the opposite of what we need right now. But there's been a lot going on today, basically to commemorate the anniversary of January 6th. And liberals especially have been going out there and doing these absurd grandstanding speeches where they preach about democracy while actively being massively corrupt and not actually trying to fight for the will of the American people. So there's been a lot of cringe liberal bullshit going on today, but I think there was one thing that stood out to me and basically gives us a perfect glimpse into how performative a lot of this actually is for them, and it was this clip right here. So again, I'm going to lay out a trigger warning right now because this is going to be easily the most cringe thing that you have seen in a long time. This is the ghoul of all ghouls, Nancy Pelosi, introducing Lin-Manuel Miranda, the guy who made the Hamilton musical, to basically come in with a couple of the guys who were also in the musical with him to give a little singing tribute on the anniversary of January 6th. It's just, this entire thing is so absurdly cringe and ridiculous. So I apologize for making you guys watch this, but I do think that it gives us a couple of lessons in terms of how misguided a lot of their critiques of January 6th actually are. So let's just go ahead and check in with Nancy Pelosi and the cast of Hamilton.
To begin the conversation, we're privileged to have a contribution from one of the great creative talents of our time, Lin-Manuel Miranda. May his beautiful words be an inspiration to us. Among the words he said and in the music, we'll make it right for you. If we lay a strong enough foundation, we'll pass it on to you and we'll give the world to you. Lin-Manuel and his father and the Hamilton singers, whom we'll hear from, said that they were all very honored to be asked to participate today. I call your attention to...
A new year brings hope for the future, new energy to face the tasks ahead of us, and a renewed promise to strengthen the foundations of our democracy. We are all stewards of the American experiment, working to pass down to our children and our grandchildren a more perfect union that treats all its citizens with fairness and equity. We should never take our rights and liberties for granted, and we must remain committed to finding a way forward together. That's what I wrote about in the song Dear Theodosia from Hamilton. I believe no challenge is worth abandoning our efforts to unite as Americans. We'll keep working, generation after generation, until we reach that someday.
Theodosia, what to say to you? You have my eyes, you have your mother's name. When you came into the world, you cried, and it broke my heart. I'm dedicating every day to you. Domestic life was never quite my style. When you smile, you knock me out, I fall apart, and I thought I was so smart. You will come of age with our young nation. We'll bleed and fight for you. We'll make it right for you.
Okay, thank you. That was enough of that. Okay, so listen, I don't know how much more of an indication that you need to understand the performative nature of a lot of this. I'm not like hating on the guys who did Hamilton. I really don't give a fuck about that, but they are literally performance artists, okay? Why would you bring them here to try to commemorate like something that you are considering as the gravest attack on democracy in modern American history? If you want people to take it seriously, especially if you're trying to have like a bipartisan consensus about trying to take it seriously, then then why the fuck would you do some shit like this and just bring on like these, the cringest of liberals to come and sing and preach to people in the most virtue signaling way humanly imaginable, to come lecture people about what happened on January 6th and about the strength of our American democracy and this great American experiment that was started by the founding fathers. And that kind of leads me into what my main criticism of all of this is listen, I mean, when it comes to January 6th, okay, like I said, I think there's a good middle ground that you can walk here in trying to give an analysis of this. You don't have to hype it up and try to justify some sort of a Patriot Act 2.0 style crackdown or the expansion of the government's surveillance powers or the powers of the police state or the military, etc. You don't need to overreact and go that route, because that wouldn't have solved the problem in the first place. What happened on January 6th, I mean, we all saw the videos of the cops literally ushering them into the building, okay? It wasn't a lack of resources. It was, they did it basically intentionally. It was an intentional failure from the people who were supposed to be the security in this sense. And on top of that, it was also a failure in the sense that the lies that were spread in regards to the 2020 election by Donald Trump and the rest of his cronies, they egged people on to do this. But if you think at the same time as all of that can be true and that Donald Trump holds a large degree of responsibility for sending these people at the Capitol, and yes, the violence was bad, and yes, all of that, you can still prosecute those people with existing laws. You don't need to justify some sort of massive government expansion in order to respond to what happened on January 6th. You can deal with it with the existing laws that already are in place. Now, to contrast that, okay, at the same time, we don't want to downplay it and pretend as if literally nothing happened, right? And that's the narratives that we hear from Trump supporters all the time, right? They say either that Antifa did it, or they say that it wasn't actually Trump supporters, or they say that there was some degree of FBI involvement. And that last part, yes, I would honestly believe that, at least to some degree, that the FBI was trying to egg on some Trump supporters and maybe had infiltrated some of these groups, but that doesn't absolve the people that actually committed crimes from the crimes that they committed. I mean, the people who are being thrown in jail right now, they're Trump supporters, okay? They're not Antifa, they're not necessarily FBI agents, they are just regular ass Trump supporters who were egged on by a bunch of lies. And I kind of almost get it, right? Because if you believe in the delusional worldview that a lot of these people believe in, then you would be justified in doing that. And maybe this is one of the more like edgy takes that I have, but I don't even necessarily inherently disagree with the concept or the idea of storming government buildings as a general population if the government is doing something that is authoritarian or that is extremely wrong. And so if you put yourself into the mind of a delusional Trump supporter who believed the election was stolen, then under their delusional worldview, which again is delusional, if you actually believe that, you would have been justified in doing what they did on January 6th. So you kind of have to have more culpability for the people who are at the top, who egged these people on, and again, hold the people who committed crimes responsible. But just in a broader picture of things, okay, a lot of this is just performative, all right? Democrats and liberals, they really want to focus on January 6th and pretend as if it was the gravest attack on our democracy in American history so that they don't have to talk about the other things. They don't have to talk about the economy and actually materially improving people's lives. They don't have to talk about the countries that we are still bombing right now. I think it's down under the Biden administration, but still somewhere around like 6 or 7 countries that we are actively bombing right now that nobody ever fucking talks about. So instead of talking about some of the more substantive issues, or even when it comes to our so-called democracy, I mean, what are Democrats doing on voting rights right now? They say they have a vote scheduled to tackle the John Lewis Freedom to Vote Act, etc. But I mean, they haven't really done anything to actually fortify or protect any democracy at all, other than just, come out and virtue signal about what happened on January 6th. And that kind of brings me to my last point, which is the critique of January 6th cannot be that this was the gravest threat. This was the gravest threat to American democracy that has ever happened. Even an extension of that, the commentary cannot be that Donald Trump himself, or that a new strong-armed leader is the singular threat to American democracy. If that's what you think is a threat to American democracy, then I don't really think you understand what democracy means, because even right now, and even before Donald Trump, you have to analyze the material conditions that existed within the United States that drove people to somebody like Donald Trump in the first place, that would open up the door for a con man, a strong-armed, fake right-wing populist like Donald Trump to get elected in the first place, okay? Those are the types of situations you have to actually be going back and analyzing, and in order to do that, you have to admit some tough things, right? You have to admit that the US is not a democracy. We are not even close to being a democracy, in the sense that our government simply does not represent the will of the American people. If it did, we would have things like a Green New Deal, Medicare for all, like the Build Back Better Act that just got completely eviscerated by a handful of corrupt Democratic senators. So it's like, you can go down the line and check, okay? Even Nancy Pelosi herself, who's in that clip virtue signaling about American democracy, right? This is a multi-million-dollar landlord who is the Speaker of the House, who literally just a couple weeks ago argued that members of Congress should be allowed to continue basically doing insider trading by, participating in the stock market on stocks that they have a direct manipulating ability on in the legislation that they are passing. So how is somebody like Nancy Pelosi, who is massively corrupt, one of the most corrupt members in Congress, how are you going to sit there and lecture people on democracy when you just very clearly at surface level don't actually believe in any sort of democracy? And it's not just within the political system, it's also within the economic system that we exist under, right? The capitalist mode of production is inherently authoritarian. It is not democratic by any sense of the imagination or any stretch of the imagination. So if you don't admit those things, if you don't admit the flaws, the tyrannical nature that exists within a capitalist system, if you don't admit the flaws that exist at a fundamental level within both parties within the United States and our political system and how it operates with dark money and billionaires and millionaires being able to funnel infinite sums of basically what amount to bribes into our political campaigns and stuff like that, it's like you're not really getting to the root of what's wrong with American democracy. You're just trying to protect this facade of democracy. You're just trying to use this as an opportunity and weaponize it cynically to try to either expand the authority of the government in very bad ways, like expanding the surveillance power or expanding the police state, or you're just being disingenuous. I mean, it's really just comes down to that.